This is a briefing session kind of midway through a project because we're entering a new phase of the project here, and we kicked off a couple of months ago and we did a whole thing around let's get lots of people involved from local authorities in learning how to use Python to write data validation rules so that we can build this tool into which we can load all our 903 data whenever we want in the year and see the same validation errors and checks come out of it as you would get at the end of the year from the DFE. And the phase we're entering now is that we've been doing that for a while, and we're getting towards the point that we've got a front end for that as well. And we want to make sure that that front end works really well for people. And that the stuff we've been doing with the Python code is also doing what it should be doing. So at this session, hopefully we'll give you a bit of a kind of a look at the tool hands-on, and then a call at the end for volunteers. I know lots of people are working on this project already in this room. Some of you wanted to be involved but haven't found the time to do the Python learning. Hopefully we can drag you back in some way, shape or form at this point. And then this kind of session and the kind of follow-up from it will act as the launching pad for kind of the second of two phases of the project, where we start now zeroing in on the thing we're going to launch in November so that local authorities can use it. The idea of this is that you can use this tool whenever you want in the year, and that's the kind of key benefit. It does what the DFE site does, but you can do it in the middle of the year, at the start of the year, whenever you like, because it's much easier to solve a data problem kind of at the point it was created or close to the point it was created than waiting a year or so before you find out that you had a problem and then trying to go track back through time and change that. It's also much easier to do it if you've only got a few problems to solve than if you save up a whole year's worth of problems. So work to date then, this has gone through a few different phases, and the key output from the alpha project was a prototype tool which ran analytical Python code in a web browser without taking the data it was looking at off the local computer. So this kind of crossed two barriers that we've always had with looking at more advanced coding approaches as local authorities. One, that it's a nightmare trying to get new software installed anywhere. The fact that this was running the Python in browser without installing anything was a big win. And two, that we have all sorts of information governance requirements when we're dealing with sensitive child level data. So we can upload our data for 903 to the DFE, and that's fine, and get that validated. That's part of the statutory collection. But if we were to do anything around that data otherwise, then we'd be working on stuff locally. So the solution we found uses I don't think this has got a slide, has it, Chris? So I'll just talk to it now. Uses a piece of technology called Pyodide, which is basically a link-up tool for Python code, so that you can have your Python environment running in your web browser. And the nice thing about it is that it all loads in your browser, which is on your computer, so it's not on the web. And it looks at the data wherever you've put your data, on your network, on a local drive on your computer, wherever it might be. It doesn't move it, and then it presents you your errors back in the browser. It doesn't save any of it. You can output things to your computer in terms of error lists and whatever else, or you can scrutinize the data there, and it's all done. So the beta project was basically to say, that's great, that works, but what's missing here? Well, two things. One is getting that tool kind of ready for a mainstream audience, and so that any local authority could log into it and just start working, and you can pass it to your data analyst colleague or your stat returns person or your business support and say, here's the data for this month, load it in and sort out the errors. The second thing was the errors themselves, and there's a few hundred validation checks in the DFE site that we needed to work through and code up. And so the way we decided to do this was, instead of handing over this specification to a developer and saying just build it and bring it back, we thought this is a great opportunity for us as analysts to learn something about Python. And that's what we've been doing over the last couple of months with a band of anywhere between kind of 3 and 15 analysts on a given week, depending on how much work other people have got on in their day jobs, to learn how to use Python to write these kinds of data validation checks. And we've got a certain way along that journey now. I think we're about a quarter or a third of the way through coding up those rules, and we've got what we think is a fairly robust front end for the tool as well. So the next stage of the project is to figure out, well, okay, how do we get from having a third of the rules coded through to all of them, or all of them we're going to do? Realistically, how many can we expect our pool of analysts to deliver? Can we get anyone else involved? Where do we need to bring in our expert who's been helping those analysts to do a little bit of that work himself? And on the other side, how do we get this front end working? And how do we test it all and make sure it actually does what it's supposed to do? So this session is to kind of talk through all of that.
Perfect.
So if I go to a web link which I have helpfully already entered, then I get to this front page, and this is styled after the GovUK design kind of guidelines. So if you ever use the 903 help desk or anything like that, then this should feel familiar. Hopefully it's more responsive than the 903 help desk, but we shall see. So we get to a page here, and you see I've got a message here saying loading Python initially takes around 30 seconds. And behind it, I've got something telling me what it's going to do. And I've got the option to load in some XML files or CSV files for the collection year that I'm interested in. My example files are from 2020-21. That's what I'm going to select. But normally you would, you'd probably be doing this in year, so you'd be saying 21-22, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to choose Staffordshire Moorlands because I am sitting here in Leek in North Staffordshire today. And if I go to this folder here, which I prepared earlier, I've got some fake 903 data in some files. I'm going to drag those across. And down here, I've got all of the rules that are in the tool at the moment and the option to say, I don't want to see them in the report. So the reason we built this in is basically so that you can say, well, maybe you know that your unique pupil number data is not very high quality and you end up doing an exercise each year to clean it up. And you don't want to see those errors flooding your error report in the output. The other use case is that maybe over time we start to use this tool for more than just 903 validation. So you want to be able to choose, oh, I just want the 903 errors, or I just want the syncensus errors, or whatever else. It's kind of future-proofed in that way. If I say, I don't want to see these errors, then it will just only do 6 to 8 validations. If I say all of them, it will pick all the errors. And then I'm going to say validate. This doesn't take very long when I'm not demoing it, but I may need to think up an anecdote to tell during a live demo. Maybe for next time.
I think maybe as we're waiting for it to load, I'm gonna share a link in the chat as well, which is to a retro board where basically you can put in anything you like about the look of the tool, anything you don't like about the look of the tool, any new ideas that you have, and general feedback, just as we're going through. Also, when we talk about some of the ways to get involved later on, or if you have any feedback about how we've been getting involved so far, any ideas in this chat or in this,
that'll be really useful to hear. So that's well timed because yeah, if you have a thought now about something that you see here, you can type it away and not have to hold on to it until you speak to us. That'd be great. So I've got a list here of children. It's gone just off the edge of the screen, possibly because I'm demoing. It's told me which rules it's running. I've got options down here for validate again, clear data and start again. If I want to go back to the beginning, download CSVs. This for me is the kind of key button in the whole tool because this gives you 2 Excel outputs that we'll look at in CSV form, showing you errors. But the browser in the middle here will give you some other things. You'll see there's quite high error counts here. That's because our fake data is designed to generate lots of errors. Also because some of them have got some kind of funky things going on here. But what we'll see when we choose one of these kids is the header row and then the different tabs, kind of similar to the 903 site for this child, and then a list of errors below. And what you can do with this is basically use it to browse through and understand which bit of the data has triggered an error. In this case, it's not that useful for this child, But if I was to choose a child that's got lots of different episode rows and I've got this error about date episode ceased is not a valid date, then this browser will show me, well, which of those rows is it that's causing a problem? So I can go away and find out, oh, it's this one. This kid started on this date, that's the problem. So this hopefully is quite familiar to most of the people on the call. If you're not familiar with the SSDA 903 site, take my word for it that this looks similar but not exactly the same. And I'd be interested in feedback from people who are familiar with the 903 site as to how similar it is and how similar it should be, really. And if there are any things I think would be good to change here, given the opportunity. I've got a filter up here as well, so I can filter by error code. It's not going to do a great deal because my test data has, errors, most errors against most children. But you can see the list of children changing there. This child's just got one error up here about the UPN. So if I choose download CSVs, then I end up with two reports, error counts and child error summary. The error count there shows me this is the error code, this is the error description, and this is how many errors I've got for that. The error summary gives me the child ID, the error they've got, description of the error, and the field that is in error. And so this is the kind of thing that in local authorities I've been working in before. Then we'd take something like this and we'd make a pivot table out of it, or we'd sort by error code and we'd split it up in different tabs and say, well, this chunk of errors, these few codes, that's for business support to look at. This other chunk of errors, they go back to the systems analyst to go and figure out what's gone wrong there. These ones we need to get the social worker involved in, so the social work service manager will take those away and go and do some digging. That is a massive exercise. If you do it at the end of the year, hopefully this is something that you could build into a regular kind of data quality exercise throughout the year. When I'm done here, I don't think I've missed anything. I think I would say clear data and start again, and I'd be right back at the start, ready to drop in more data and go ahead and do some more checking. A couple of things to note just before I finish the demo is the site doesn't store any of that child level data. So there's no option within it to make changes on the data there. And that's a kind of design decision that we made, firstly around those IG concerns that I talked about, but also around the idea that you would want to fix the data in your source system if you're doing in-year validation, not fix it in a file export that you've produced for this tool, because then you would be keeping that and having to keep that exported file up to date through the year until you get your return. So the expectation is the way you would do this is you'd load in your data, find out what the errors are, go and fix them in the source system, and then when the end of the year rolls around, load it all up to the DFE. Again, coming back to that thing about, well, you can choose which validation rules you show. So if there are some things you just can't fix in year, then you can leave those out of your kind of monthly or weekly reporting, whatever it is you decide to do with this. And that's about it. I don't have any Python stuff installed on this computer. That's just all run in the browser. The key things that you'll see are missing are that we've got 71 rules in here. There's 300 validation rules. Some of the more complicated ones we've already done. There's a whole thing around postcode checking, that it links out to an external postcode file to check for valid postcodes. Some of the more complicated things we've not done around cross-year validation, going back potentially 5 to 18 years. This next phase of development is going to be about figuring out which of those challenges are worth tackling, which are going to be most useful to us as we do this kind of data validation work in year.